Being a young Latina in the United States means living within a rich and vibrant culture, but it also means facing challenges and often navigating tricky cultural barriers. I am Patricia Alvarado Núñez.
And I'm Liz Cheng. Patricia and I co-executive produce Stories from the Stage for GBH and World Channel.
We have recorded many fascinating stories about what it is like to be Latinx in the United States, both from the perspective of those who were born and raised here and from those who, like me, moved here from Latin America. Today, we picked 3 of our favorite stories from our collection to share with you.
Rosanna Salcedo, a first-generation Dominican born and raised in Washington Heights, New York, discovers that friendship can cross all barriers of age, ethnicity, and culture.
Ana Hebra Flaster, who emigrated to the United States when she was 6, describes her chaotic and emotional last night at home before leaving Cuba forever.
And Michelle Carlo, a New Yorican, turns lemons into lemonade when she gets busted moonlighting during an internship at a major advertising agency.
3 stories that will make you cry, laugh, and reflect. Here are our hosts of this episode, Wes Hazard and Teresa O'Cocken.
My name is Rosanna Maria Salcedo. I'm one of the deans at the Cambridge School of Weston, the Dean of Equity and Inclusion. I was born in the United States, but my parents are from the Dominican Republic.
And I understand that you write poetry and you paint, and you're also writing a memoir?
Yes, it's not something that I've ever felt like I could pursue professionally full-time, but in my personal life, art has always been, it's just been a huge part. Storytelling is actually a new thing for me, but I feel like I've written so much that I have a lot of great material to share.
So as an educator, I imagine you're pretty used to talking in front of groups. So I'm guessing for storytelling, stage fright isn't what gets you. What do you find to be the most challenging in this process?
I think what's challenging is I like talking, but I'm an academic primarily, right? So I'm not an actor. So there's just a level of self-consciousness about performing the story. Both of my parents emigrated from the Dominican Republic to New York City in the 1960s after the Trujillo dictatorship when they were in their teens. They came independently of each other, neither of them having received much formal education. My mother became a factory worker in a sweatshop on Delancey Street. My father was a physical laborer. Eventually, they met and married, and they had this sweet girl 2 years later. When I was 3 and my father was 25, my family got its first big break. My father knew someone who knew someone who knew a landlord who needed a superintendent for his building on 187th Street and Cabrini Boulevard in Washington Heights, New York City. My father went to talk to the landlord. The landlord explained that the superintendent would be responsible for making sure that the building always had heat and hot water, for fixing things when they were broken, for removing trash from the building several times a week, and keeping the building clean. In return, the super and his family would be allowed to live in a windowless 2-bedroom apartment in the basement, rent-free, and would receive a modest salary. My father was thrilled. He eagerly accepted the position. This would allow us to live in a more affluent neighborhood than we could afford. It would allow me and my brothers to attend a better public school, and it would allow my mother to be a stay-at-home mom. To subsidize my father's salary, my mother would often clean apartments in the building after he came home from work. One of the women for whom she cleaned was Edith Mesabov. She was an elderly Jewish woman who lived directly above us on the first floor, and she got to know us really well. The windows to Edith's apartment overlooked the front of the building. And in good weather, when my brothers and I played on the sidewalk, Edith would sit by her kitchen window and watch us playing for hours. Eventually, she would reach out, wave, and call out, "Hi, Rosie, hi, Angel." And we would stop what we were doing and smile and wave back, but we couldn't really communicate because we didn't speak much English. Edith told my mother that she would be willing to meet with me on a regular basis to help improve my English language skills in preparation for school. My mother gratefully accepted the offer. I began to meet with Edith twice a week in her kitchen. At first, the meetings were awkward. Edith was so much older than me, and everything about Edith was different. I was most struck by how utterly alone she lived. In contrast, I lived with my parents and my siblings. My abuela lived 2 or 3 blocks away, and I saw her every weekend. And my tios and primos and tias also lived in the neighborhood. My house was always full of people. But I thought, Edith must be somebody's abuela. And she's sweet and kind and gentle and always has cookies for me when we have our sessions. By the time kindergarten came around, I was ready. I was confident. One holiday, Edith asked my mother if she could take me to the theater, and my mother said yes. I was so excited. That Saturday, I put on my best Sunday clothes, my white tights and patent leather shoes, and when Edith came to get me, I saw that she was also wearing her fancy clothes, and she took me by the hand, and we walked down to the bus stop on Fort Washington Avenue to wait for the number 4 bus. The number 4 bus travels from the northern tip of Manhattan all the way down to Midtown. When the bus came, we boarded the bus and I was able to get a window seat. And from there, I could see the neighborhood's transition from Washington Heights to Harlem. And then on 110th Street, the bus turns and curls around the east side of Central Park, continuing its trajectory down Fifth Avenue. By that point, I felt like I was in a different world. I was most impressed by the structures, buildings like the Guggenheim and the Metropolitan Museum of Art. This was a part of New York I had not yet seen. At some point during the bus ride, Edith asked, "Rosie, are you hungry?" And I nodded yes. She said, "Do you want a bagel?" And I said, "What's a bagel?" And everyone erupted in laughter. We got off on 54th Street and walked a couple of blocks to the Ziegfeld Theater. The Ziegfeld is an old New York theater, all red velvet and shiny brass. It was definitely the fanciest place I have ever been. Edith bought exotic snacks for me called Raisinets. And we took our seats. As it turns out, we were going to watch a viewing of Disney's Fantasia. You can imagine my childhood delight when I saw Mickey as big as life on the giant screen. This was also my introduction to classical music. It was one of the most memorable moments of my life. As I got older and I progressed in school and I made new friends, my friendship with Edith became less and less important. We didn't have our regular sessions anymore. It wasn't necessary. I was actually excelling in school. One day, when I came home from school, I was in junior high school at the time, I came home and my mother was really, really upset. She told me that Edith had passed away. My parents hadn't seen or heard her for a while, and when they went to check on her, they found her. As it turns out, Edith did have a daughter on the West Coast, and my father knew how to contact her. When Edith's daughter came to take care of her mother's remains, my family and I went to pay our respects. We went up to the apartment and knocked on the door. When she opened the door, she looked at me and said, "You must be Rosie. I know all about you." She welcomed us inside and we sat with her for a while. At some point, she asked me to accompany her to Edith's bedroom, and she led me to Edith's dresser. On top of Edith's dresser was a number of framed pictures of me at different stages in my life. Me on a tricycle, my first grade class picture with my front teeth missing, me during my first Holy Communion. I always understood the impact that Edith had had on my life. But until that moment, I had never really thought about the impact that I may have had on hers. Thank you.
The everlasting friendship of Rosie and Edith transcends all boundaries and makes me reflect on the power of love to create strong bonds between people, no matter how different they may appear.
I must admit, Liz, that I have heard this story more than a dozen times, and it gets me every time.
Rosie's delayed realization of Edith's love for her is so moving for me. If you enjoyed this story as much as we do and would like to hear others like it, please consider making a donation to give.worldchannel.org/stories so that we can continue to find and bring new stories to you.
Coming up next, storyteller Michelle Carlo.
Our next performer coming to the stage, Michelle Carlo.
I'm a native New Yorker. I'm also a storyteller and a solo theatrical performer and actor. I'm a natural redhead, and I'm a Nuyorican, which means I'm a person of Puerto Rican heritage that was born and raised in New York City.
Why is it important for you to talk about your Latina experience? Like, how does that manifest in your stories?
Because Latinos and people of color in general, our stories have been dismissed, discounted, and discarded. When I was growing up, there were no Latinas in the media for me to emulate. And I noticed that for every other culture, a foreign, if you will, accent was considered elegant and desirable, but a Latino accent was considered base and unlovely. And my mission with any art that I do, whether I'm writing a solo show or telling a story or writing, is I want the world to know who we were and why we mattered.
It was 1982, and I had finally been accepted into the art school of my dreams, only to learn I might have to drop out before it even began. My father lost his job, and my family had to go on welfare, and I had no idea how I was going to be able to continue. So as a last resort, I went to the school's guidance counselor, who asked me, well, didn't you apply for any financial aid? And I answered, yes, I had, but let me explain. I am a redheaded, freckle-faced, pale-skinned Puerto Rican who grew up in an Italian-Irish neighborhood. I am the red sheep of my Latino family. I was the fish out of agua in my neighborhood. I was never Latin enough for most people in my family, and I was never white enough for most people in my neighborhood. And at this point in my life, I was just so over anything having to do with having to explain who or what I was. Where the application said put in your ethnicity, I wrote in redhead. And where it said race, I put human. And the counselor looked at me like, what is wrong with you, girl? And then she painstakingly explained that specifically because I was a Latina, I was qualified for all kinds of financial aid. What is wrong with you, girl? So I resubmitted the applications, and I got all the aid I needed to stay in school, along with an internship, a prestigious internship at a major advertising agency. Thank you. It was called the Minority Student Internship Program. Kids from colleges all across New York had applied. 12 were accepted, and I was one of them. Thanks. Only I nearly blew it that first day and was thrown out because of something called LPT. Does anyone here know what LPT is? It's what we call Latin people time. It's a misunderstanding of the space-time continuum that causes the afflicted to leave their house at the time they're supposed to be wherever they are going. And yeah, that happened to me. And besides being late, I learned that I also had a misunderstanding of what was considered proper office attire. My fellow internees were wearing Lacoste and Le Tigre polo shirts and little Benetton bow blouses. And I was wearing a violet tiger print t-shirt and black spandex pants and pointy-heeled shoes with long feather earrings, yes. And I know, what were you wearing in 1982? Come on. But then they served breakfast, and there were croissants. I had never seen a croissant before. For the past few months, I had been living on hot dogs and that welfare cheese and that peanut butter in a can, and when I tasted one, I ate, and I ate, and I ate, and I ate, and I ate, until I took a breath, and I saw that all the brown and beige faces of the interns on this side, and all the older and paler faces of the leaders on that side were glaring at me. And I thought, this is it, Michelle. You blew it. You are going to be thrown out of here, and you're going to have to, and you didn't get this internship because of merit. You got it because of fraud, and you're going to have to go right back to that top floor tenement, walk up and rot, because that's what you deserve. And then when I came to, everybody was leaving. And the interns left without saying goodbye to me, and as I tried to sneak out, the leaders of the group called me back and warned me to not be late again in the future. And by the way, where is my family from again? And the next week, I'm in my cubicle when I hear a commotion behind me. And then I realized that every intern had been assigned to a different agency, and every week we were going to visit a different intern to see what he or she was doing. And this first week, guess what? It was my turn. So all the interns and all the leaders file into my cubicle, and they catch me not doing agency work, but designing T-shirts that I was going to sell at the summer rock concerts in Central Park. And there's a moment of silence where everybody's like looking, and then the preppiest male intern of them all looks at the T-shirt that I'm designing and says, wow, you know King Crimson? And I said, know them? Well, we're making these T-shirts for them, which was kind of not really true. I mean, my boyfriend and I, yes, we were together making these T-shirts to sell at the concert, but King Crimson didn't know who we were. And then another silence. And then the questions start, a barrage of questions. Well, where do you get the T-shirts? And what kind of ink do you use? And what is your sales model? And I answered, I said, we get the T-shirts at this wholesaler on Orchard Street, and I get the silkscreen ink from Pearl Paint. I didn't tell them that the sales model was basically my boyfriend and I sneaking into the concerts and waving the T-shirts around. Buy one, buy one, buy one. But amazingly, I became the model project for the group. And every week after that, they would ask me how my T-shirt business was going. And one week, one of the girls who had given me the worst side eye of all, the day I ate all the croissants, she came up to me and she confessed that at that breakfast, she too wanted to eat all the croissants. Because she had never seen one before, and her family was on welfare too. I certainly learned a lot that summer at that internship. I learned what was and what wasn't proper office attire. I learned how not to make a glutton of myself at a catered luncheon. And I also learned that I had a pretty darn good design eye, and the agency offered me a job after graduation. Only, thank you. On our last meeting, which was going to be a big catered farewell lunch, I was stricken with LPT again, and I was 15 minutes late, and I was trembling as my hand was on that doorknob. Were they gonna throw me out? Was I gonna lose my job? Was everybody gonna like yell at me? And then when I opened the door, I saw 11 smiling faces waving me in. They were about to take a group picture, and they had told the photographer to hold it, to wait for me until I got there, because the summer would not have been the same without me. And I do admit to occasionally suffering from a relapse of LPT, but I've learned to joke about it. And I like to say that when my time comes, on my tombstone is going to be engraved, there lies Michelle Carlo. She needed another 15 minutes. Thank you, everybody.
I'm so happy to bring up your next teller to the stage, Ana Eble-Flaster.
I was born in Havana, Cuba, and I came to the United States at the age of 6. And I was raised in New England, but very Cuban. Had a multi-generational family. Gradually got into storytelling and writing essays for newspapers, Boston Globe, and the New York Times.
Was there anyone in your family or, the extended circle of people that you grew up with who was particularly a strong storyteller, like
yes.
the storyteller of the family?
Oh yeah. My father.
Your father?
My father. One of my earliest memories was being in Cuba, and he would come home from the factory for lunch, and we would lie down, and he'd try to get us to take our nap. The only way he could do it was by telling us stories, and then we'd fall asleep. But I remember very clearly hearing his stories at nap time. November 1967. I'm 6 years old. I live in Juanelo, Cuba, a working-class suburb of Havana. 4 generations of my family live all around me. Windows and doors are always open. Everybody knows everybody's business. Most of the adults work at factories nearby. And while they're working, The abuelas, the grandmothers, watch over us, and they're really good at what they do. If you even think about doing something bad, one of them shows up and ruins everything. But something really weird is happening in our neighborhood, and I can't figure it out. Every now and then, a family disappears overnight. The adults say, oh, they flew away to Florida, whatever that is. I'm just not sure what's going on, but I know that those disappearances are connected somehow to the sound of a motorcycle coming into the neighborhood. My parents aren't quite happy, and I realize that something's going on with them as well. They had applied to leave the country, and they had applied for their exit papers 3 years before, not knowing if or when they would ever get them. They had supported the revolution in the 50s like most working-class Cubans, but after the revolution, instead of getting the restored democracy that they had hoped for, they got ration books, propaganda, repression, and executions on live TV. So somewhere in the mid-60s, they decided, come hell or high water, we're getting out of Cuba. So one night, I'm at my abuela Cuca's house, who lives right down the street from us, and I'm chasing chickens. She had these skinny little hens that I love to chase around, and I hear a motorcycle coming into the neighborhood. So I want to figure this out. I take off down the street, round the corner, and in front of my house is a huge mob. And on the sidewalk is an enormous motorcycle. Inside, my father is sitting at the kitchen table, and he's answering questions that this government guard is asking him. Back here, my mother's running around packing a suitcase. And over here is my grandmother, Fina, Abuela Fina, who lives with us. That's my other grandmother. And she's holding my baby brother in a death grip, shaking and crying. I go over, and I'm shaking and crying. And I'm asking questions, but nobody ever tells kids anything. But the guard notices me at that point. Niña, ven acá. Girl, come over here. Is it true that you want to leave your house and your friends and never come back? And my mother and my grandmother and my father answer for me, sí, ella quiere. In no time, we're out on the street, and I look, and the guard is locking the front door and sealing it shut with a banner that years later I find out reads property of the revolution. He tells us to be at the airstrip tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, and the following morning we will fly out to the United States. So that night we spend at my uncle's apartment right above ours, and people start to show up to say goodbye. My great-grandfather, all kinds of relatives, and then my first grade teacher. I love her, but I don't know what to do with her in that setting, and I don't want to look at her. My mother comes over and says, Anita, your teacher was very brave to come here tonight. She came to the house of a gusano family. Gusano means worm, and that's what the government called people like us who were leaving Cuba. So she was brave. I want you to be brave. Ponte guapa. Make yourself brave and go and say goodbye. So I make myself brave, and I go out, and she's kneeling in front of me. Tears are just falling down her face, and I lose it. Every bit of confusion and fear just explodes. And I'll never forget the feeling. It was like I was going to float away. It felt like I was going to just lift up and go away. The next night, it's 8 o'clock at night, and we arrive at the airport as instructed with 200 other gusanos all around and lots of little kids. And at first it's a blast because we're playing and we're running around, getting dirty even. We're in our best clothes. But then there's nothing to eat when we get hungry, and there's no place to sleep when we get tired, and there's some crying, and finally everybody just falls asleep on top of each other. All night long, over the loudspeakers, names are called out, and what's happening is that the government is harassing the people who are leaving, and they're scaring them, telling them all kinds of things that are going to keep them there. But we get out, and the next morning we get on the plane, and right before we take off, the attendant comes down the aisle and sprays us with disinfectant, air freshener, I don't even know. I know that it must have felt like a slap in the face to everyone who was there. Next couple of days, we spend in a refugee processing center outside of Miami. We get boots, coats, hats, get put on a plane, and somehow we end up in Nashua, New Hampshire. But I'm fascinated because there's snow taller than I am, and icicles hanging from roofs, and I have a brand new teacher to love. And at night, we get to watch Gilligan's Island and learn more English. And our favorite show is Los Orejones, the big-eared ones, which you guys call Star Trek. And my parents have new jobs at a rubber boot factory. But I'm very worried because I keep finding my mother in a dark room in the house crying. Mommy, what's the matter? I have a headache. But I know she doesn't have a headache. And my grandmother doesn't stop crying from the moment she wakes up to the moment she falls asleep. And we sleep together like we did in Cuba. And at night, I can feel her shaking, and when I put my arm around her, sometimes she stops and we fall asleep like that. And I have my own issues at night, too. For the first and only time in my life, I'm hearing voices. They come out of nowhere. I can't sleep. They come in waves. They're angry and piercing, and I can't understand what they are saying, and I cover my ears, but I still hear them. And I don't tell anybody, ever, that story, and I guess I was trying to be brave. The one thing that does make everybody happy in the house, the adults, is when we get a letter from Havana, from the old women who never forgot us. And I have those letters now. They've been folded and unfolded so many times that they're like Kleenexes. Sometimes the old women are saying nothing important, a little of this, a little of that, but even if it's a bad event, they're always optimistic somehow. And I imagine that in every line of every letter, they are sending us a message, an unwritten message. Ponte guapa. Make yourself brave. Thank you.
Each of these stories offered a window into the Latinx experience, who we are and why we matter. As an immigrant, the story of Anna's family and their letters that have been folded and unfolded so many times remind me of my own letters from home, Panama, which when I first arrived in the United States gave me the courage to persevere.
If you enjoyed hearing the rich experiences of Rosie, Anna, and Michelle, please consider supporting Stories from the Stage by donating to give.worldchannel.org/stories.
Help us discover and bring new storytellers to our stage. Consider making a gift of any amount to give.worldchannel.org/stories. And thank you.